Welcome to another episode of Local Paper TV. And today we have with us the Liberal candidate for the federal seat of McEwen, Richard Welch. Welcome, Richard.
Good morning, Ash, and thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Now, how long have you been in the seat of being the Liberal candidate for the federal seat of McEwen?
Well, not that long, I have to say, because most of the last 20 years I've lived in the UK and India. So I came back to Australia in 2019 with my family. So we've moved into Wallen about a year ago, just over a year ago. But we're still settling the kids, still settling the family. It's still an adjustment for some of them. But I think the significant thing is I was born in Seymour and I grew up in little country towns, just like the ones all spread across McEwen. So this is my community. I understand this community very well.
So McEwen is an interesting hybrid seat. It takes in parts of Macedon Ranges Shire, Mitchell Shire, the city of Whittlesea, and parts of Nillumbik Shire as well. And it has changed. There's approximately 100,000 voters.
Yes.
So you've got a mixture of rural voters and quite urban voters.
Yeah.
How do you serve those? How do you serve both or the many types of voters in the electorate, Richard?
Yes, and it's changed and continues to change because, as we know, that population that you've quoted, 100,000, is due to double within the decade. Yeah. So, look, there are commonalities. The commonalities is that there are an enormous number of young families that have moved to the area. They want a good life. They want jobs in the region. They don't want long commutes, and they want good roads. So there are strong commonalities across the electorate, wherever you are. Good telecommunications, a need for us to address domestic violence and youth mental health as well. So those are the common things. But one of the beauties, I think it's a real beauty of the electorate, one thing I really enjoy, is that each community is distinct in that they've got their footy club, they've got their RSL, they've got their bowls club, they've got their local schools. And those communities are all quite, beautiful, and they've got their own priorities and their own issues. And I've really enjoyed the fact that you can go to a Kilmore, or you can go to a Romsey, or you can go to a Gisborne, and you work into a whole new community and you learn about them. So I find that that's actually a good thing, and it's a nice thing. It's not one homogenous group. The other thing, I think what you're really, we've got that urban fringe, which is creeping inevitably forward, northward. And we've got a rural setting where people are genuinely farming, and have those interests. And those two things do get into conflict because urban infrastructure and urban environment demands certain things that the population density needs. As we go further out, we're much more interested in the road networks and the things that join us together, and whether there's enough local resource sports facilities and other things out there. So it's complex. It's complex, has those complexities, but I enjoy that. I think that's part of the pleasure of trying to serve McEwen, I think.
Richard, before we go into some of the issues facing the McEwen electorate, let's learn a little bit about yourself. You said you were raised in small country towns, one of them being Seymour. Tell us about your experiences in different parts of the electorate.
Well, I guess I would say probably the most relevant things was I was a country kid, grew up in a town of 2,500 people in South Gippsland, actually, Lee and Gaffer. Brought up, my dad was a teacher, my mum was a nurse, very community-orientated family. I had lots of good values, I felt, but probably a little bit wet behind the ears, as most country 17-year-olds are. Came to the big city for a job, worked in financial services, and worked my way up in that, and then was sent over to the UK by my company in my early 30s. So from that point, I was outside Australia. So from around 2000 onwards, I was in the UK. While I was there, I did an MBA at Imperial College, London. And from that, I actually devised a new technology. I invented a new form of motion tracking technology using what was at the time a fairly pioneering form of neural networking. I commercialized that, raised capital, and built a factory in India, North India, to manufacture and continue the R&D of that. So I spent a good 14 years going between UK and India to build the factory, staff it up. I learned manufacturing, import, export, R&D, dealing with probably the most complex bureaucracy in the world in India, and launched my company and a product into 30 different countries.
Richard, how does that translate to assisting small businesses throughout the Mitchell electorate?
Well, I think that's really, really relevant, because what I learned, I was at different stages of that entrepreneurial journey. I was the chief executive and chief toilet cleaner. I was the guy who had to make sure cash flow meant we could pay wages at the end of the month. Right. I was the guy having to deal with tax. I think the really relevant thing is that when we talk about government policy in relation to business, for me, that's not a theoretical exercise. I know directly that different government policies have a direct and almost immediate effect on how someone operates their business, how they look forward, whether their propensity to take risks with what they're going to do next, whether they're going to take someone on or not. So that's hard, real world experience.
Richard, what are you hearing from small business operators in the Mitchell electorate after 2 years of COVID? What do small businesses require most, and how can you, as a prospective local member, assist them?
Yeah, you're right, Ash. They've been whacked, absolutely whacked. And not just whacked once, whacked multiple times. They got knocked down, they got back on their feet, they got knocked down again. And each time, it's a little bit harder to get back up with confidence, get back up with certainty, and be willing to take risks. What they need is certainty. What they need is less regulation. They need and what we've delivered is lower tax so that their cash flow situations can improve. But I think also they need confidence. Any business and any business owner needs the confidence to take a risk or to expand or to act on the plan they've probably been sitting on for a year, 2 years. I don't know any business person who sits there thinking, well, this is it. This is how my business will always be. We're always thinking ahead. What is our next plan? Where do we want to be in 2 years or 3 years, and how are we going to get there? And they're waiting for the right conditions to do that. We haven't had those conditions for 2 years. Victoria, is, as you know, is a very overtaxed, over-regularised state. We're probably the least attractive for investment at the moment. We need to make the environment, reduce tax, reduce regulation, and free up commercial space. I think we've got a shortage of commercial space across the electorate. We need to work with the councils to see if we can get some more office and building and factory space to grow out. And we need labour. We need labour skills. We need people with the right sorts of skills.
Richard, how does one man, even if he's elected to federal parliament, change that for Mitchell?
Oh, one man can't. No, I can't. But collectively, if you, with the right perseverance, a bit of creativity and the right mindset, and you keep banging that drum, we can bring people around in small ways and in big ways over time to steer that ship in the right direction. I'll give you a really good example, Ash. We don't have any shared work hub spaces in McEwen. We don't have any entrepreneurial incubators in McEwen. Now, these are simple things, and there's businesses that do that we should be attracting to our electorate to say, okay, you want to start a new business? Here's some infrastructure for you. If you want to start a new business, here's roads and here's some commercial space at reasonable rates that you can get to. If we talk to the councils, we need to be focusing on growing our way out of this problem. So we've got lots of debt, we've got low regional employment, we've got people having to do long commutes. Our councils, our state and our federal all need to work together to push forward for economic growth and economic development, particularly because it's also the policy to put another 100,000 people into our electorate.
Yeah, Richard, I don't mean to be blunt, but we talk of incubators and we talk of hubs. I wonder what relevance that has to the small business guy just operating his business from perhaps home or shared premises, who says, look, there was a bit of federal government and state government money during COVID, during the crisis, but my business basically burnt to the ground, and now there's no assistance whatsoever. Coming up to an election, what optimism can you offer to, say, small business operators and the people who work within those small businesses? Yeah.
Well, look, I think even just yesterday, the Treasurer announced a number of measures exactly addressing this. Ones with cash flow relief, eased regulation and reporting. So we're massively reducing the amount of reporting and the regularity, some of the GST reporting and other business activity reporting going from monthly to quarterly or even annually. We're using systems to combine reporting. So the amount of effort that people have to put into managing the regulatory side of their business is going to be radically reduced. We've got the lowest small business tax rates for 50 years right now. We're providing 50% subsidy to people taking on apprentices. Now, these are things that are all relevant and tangible to local business. Because at the end of the day, small business is about capital, it's about cash flow, and it's about skills and customers. We're helping on all those areas.
Okay, our discussion today, and I've probably led it down this path of business. Let's turn to families. What are families telling you across the electorate that they need to have done differently?
I've got a young family, so this question's relevant to me. I've got a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old myself. Look, I think the thing that's at the forefront of people's minds right now is the after effects of lockdown and getting our kids adjusted. My daughter's in year 9. This is the first year of high school she's had that's not been disrupted, that she hasn't had to learn, which was a pretty extraordinary experience. We have a very serious situation with mental health and anxiety amongst our young people. And we are going to have to invest heavily in that. That's what they wanted. They want to see those support networks. They don't want to see any more lockdowns. That's for certain.
Yes, certainly. Now, you and I, in a previous conversation, spoke about the importance of mental health, especially around the Whittlesea, Kinglake areas, bushfire recovery areas. Even though we're years on from some of those fires, that mental health issue is probably more prominent than it's ever been.
Yes.
How can you assist? What are you hearing?
Look, there is a concerted, and we put nearly $1 billion into new mental health services that go around it. Those bushfire, the scars from the bushfire, I've seen firsthand in places like Wandong are just below the surface. You don't have to scratch very hard to reveal the anxieties. Mental health is going to need a very wide, broad brush approach to deal with it. Some of it can be delivered through government, and some of it can be delivered through charity. But really, society needs stability. Society needs a certain way forward. We need to provide that security for them. Now, services are one part of it. Having good, solid jobs and employment and a stable society with other social resources, whether it's aquatic centres or sports centres or other things that complement people's mental health, they've got work-life balance. They're all part of that formula.
Richard, you are visiting lots of local places. You're seen at talking points. You set up centres in shopping centres to talk with locals. You've been at Whittlesea Market. You've particularly working towards the southern end of the electorate, Yarrambat and Diamond Creek. You've been noticed there as well. You've had some focus around the Midland area through the Macedon Ranges and so on. Is there a common message, or are there different messages coming from people to you?
Oh, look, absolutely. The most common message, Ash, is roads. And as someone who's done all that driving, I can attest the roads are in the worst state I have ever seen them. And sometimes you might say, oh yeah, people complain about roads, but actually you drive those roads, they're appalling. There is roadwork signs on practically every route and speed limitations on practically every single route and there is I think there's a real issue, because I don't know how the contracts are being handed out. But it'd be very interesting to see whether there's been some sort of lowering of standard of those repairs or some other quality control issue, because I think a lot of people are telling me the repairs come in, but they don't last.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Mitchell electorate. Earlier on, we discussed that there, in the last election, I think there were just over 100,000 voters. How many voters are there this time around?
It's with the redistribution, which brought Diamond Creek in, Woodend in, and Sunbury came out to the new electorate. We're around 110,000. 110,000 eligible voters. But
Okay.
the interesting stat there, Ash, is up to just under 30% of the voters there now weren't in this electorate at the last election.
Now, I guess your team has examined booth by booth different numbers of who belongs where.
Yes.
What's your snapshot? What's your analysis? It's quite a different electorate. The only to last time around, the only similarity is the name. McEwen electorate has had an interesting history of, even though there have been swings of 5 or even more percent, sometimes there have been contested elections where it's come down to hundreds of votes. We look at past competitions between Fran Bailey, Peter Cleland, Rob Mitchell. So where do you stand in this? What are your hopes and what are your fears?
Well, look, I think I have to. I'm the underdog. We have an incumbent who's been there some time, and the incumbency has its advantages. So I've really got to make the case. That's the most important thing, and part of the reason I've tried to be so visible and accessible is to make the case that I want to do things differently. The electorate, change. McEwen is subject to redistribution boundary changes almost every time there is a redistribution anywhere. I've forgotten the thread of your question, actually.
Well, the electorate has the same name, but it constitutes a quite different nature to even 3 or 4 years ago when the 2019 election.
And I think the really big change is that population, northern fringe of the urban area growing out, the demographics of that area are very different. We have a large Indian community now. They've taken up residence, but they're all young families. They all have, they want to live the Australian dream. They want to own their own home. They want their kids to go to schools, and they want a stable job. So the more things change, the more they stay the same, actually.
Richard, does the redistribution favour you or work against you as a candidate?
I think it's broadly neutral, Ash. I think it's broadly neutral. Certainly, Diamond Creek, I think I can make a strong case there. I think it's more the population changes had a bigger effect than the boundary change, to be honest.
What percentage of the electorate does that Diamond Creek, Yarrambat area constitute of the entire electorate?
Yeah, there's 3 major, if you like, population centres: Gisborne, Doreen and Diamond Creek. So it's about 14-15% of the total vote. And the margin, depending on who you ask, it's either between 4.9 and 5.3%. So actually, any one of these regions, a Diamond Creek or a Doreen or Gisborne or even a Wallen or even a community swing is enough to move the seat. That's why it's so important to engage across all of them, actually.
Well, often it's been said that even the Doreen, Mernda area is equal to, say, an area of Greater Shepparton or the Shepparton city. It's quite a profound area of influence. And if you can convert quite a substantial area of that in perhaps 2 or 3 of those hubs that you mentioned, it brings a quite significant difference in the overall vote.
Oh, it does. And look, and I have to say that's why I'm optimistic. I think we can make a very good case for change in McEwen. And if you do engage, if you're willing to do the travel, if you're willing to be out there with people and hearing what they're saying and showing a genuine engagement, showing a genuine concern for what's going on in their town or their region, then I don't think I'm without hope in this. I genuinely think I've made a good case, and I will continue to make a good case that I'll be a champion for the electorate as a whole, but the specific concerns of each of those regions.
Richard, as I understand it, the federal election's due to be called by around about mid or late May. So that gives us less than 2 months before people go to the polls. What do you think the major issues are going to be over the coming weeks?
Economic certainty, jobs, national security. And I think the other really big one, and you asked me earlier what's a common theme across the electorate. I can tell you another one that's after people have dispensed with roads, The other one is manufacturing. That really, really strong burning desire that Australia becomes a manufacturer again. And you asked me, okay, talking about businesses and small business, actually, that my long-term passion is that we have manufacturing back in. So I think that's going to be a major theme.
Yes.
I think jobs will be a major theme. We have had to spend big to keep the community together through the pandemic. We can't tax our way out of that debt. We have to grow our way out of that debt. So, maintaining our government's economic record and on jobs, we've got the lowest jobs we've had for many, many years. We're hopefully going to dip below 4%. Record growth in women's employment in particular, but also the issues of national security in a changing region with its challenges, and our ability to be self-sufficient. I think that are major themes. And one more, Ash, if I may, infrastructure. Now, McEwen, with all this population growth, what we've really lacked is infrastructure growth that matches. We've got a lot of projects across McEwen, if you like, that are sort of half pregnant, muted, feasibility study done, got halfway, and then nothing.
Yes.
That in particular. Now, so I think in some senses, my job in some respects has been made easy because the business cases are all there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not as if I've had to come and work these out for things from scratch. Some of these have got 10 to 15 year histories. If we're talking about Kilmore Bypass or the Macedon Rangers Sports Precinct or the Wallen Diamond or Yan Yan Road or any of these things. These things have got history. What it lacks, specifically here, in my view, is a champion. Right.
So do you see, in calling yourself or a member for McEwen as a champion, that your role involves being an encourager, a motivator, bringing all these parties together so that a federal member becomes the hub for these improvements to be kick-started, as it were?
Yeah, look, I think that's a genuine aspect of leadership in an area, in a region. And look, if I've got one quality I think that my career has demonstrated is to be able to take different skills, different people, and unite them behind a common vision. Yeah. And that's what I did with my business, and that's what I would do. Engage. We're an electorate of many talents. We're an electorate of great potential, but we've got to bring those elements together.
Richard, in wrapping up, it looks to me as though in round figures that if there's 100,000 voters plus, and you suggested perhaps another 10,000 since the last election in 2019.
Yes.
And there's probably a 5,000 or 6,000 voter gap that if you win those 5,000 or 6,000 votes, yes, you'll be the member for McEwen. Could you explain to us what the point of difference is between you as a candidate and the incumbent, Rob Mitchell, who's the Labor House of Representatives member for McEwen at the moment?
Well, look, and Rob's a fine guy, and a lot of people get on well with Rob, and yes, I've got no beef with Rob at all. Look, I think it comes down to a couple of things: real world experience, and particularly in manufacturing and small business, energy, and commitment, hunger, if you like. I think that's one thing I want to present to people is that I'm hungry for the success of our community, which means I don't want things half done, lying around half done when they could be pushed through. And I'm going to provide that commitment and energy to give things an almighty shove. And I've got a track record that suggests I can do that sort of thing. That's something I'm able to do.
All right. Richard, thank you very much. You've been very generous with your time. We've been speaking with Richard Welch, Liberal candidate for the electorate of McEwen in the Federal House of Representatives. Thank you for your time, Richard.
Thank you, Ash. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.